Welcome to the greatest podcast in sports betting entertainment. My name is Tanner Kern, certified G, bona fide stud, and you can't teach that. In this right here, this is G Money Grant Mitchell. We are here breaking down the college football playoff, the debate that is SMU, Indiana. Should these teams have been in? Tennessee, should they have been in? We're going to break that down on the podcast today. Before we do that, Grant, tell them why they need to check out WSN, Ride the Line, every single platform that we are on.
Yeah, Tanner and I have been posting for gosh knows how long, and we're going to be taking you through the college football playoff. The NFL playoffs are right around the corner. NBA All-Star Game, NHL, whatever you want, we're going to be talking about it. And then WSN.com. You know, Tanner, myself, a team of experts, we talk about games, we give analysis and previews, we talk betting trends. We've got promo codes for sportsbooks. Everything you want in the world of sports betting, you'll find it at WSN.com.
The only cool thing that the NBA has done this season, honestly, is the Mickey Mouse game that's coming tomorrow.
Is that I actually don't know anything about that. Is that like when they animated the Toy Story football game?
Yeah, so they're doing it's on Main Street USA at Disney. Grant, what's going on with the Celtics right now, too? Another loss yesterday? What's going on?
That one was weird, too, because Orlando's a very good team. Don't get me wrong. Orlando's awesome. I love watching them. But Paolo Banchero was out. Franz Wagner was out. Mo Wagner was out. Jalen Suggs ended up playing, but he was day-to-day, I believe, with an ankle, so he was banged up. And, yeah, they lost outright. That was pretty crazy.
No Tatum, though. Tatum didn't play.
No Tatum, but – and I mean, that's a big but. But, the Celtics without Tatum are better than the Magic without three of their top four.
Oh, on 100%. But the Celtics are still – the best team in the NBA with Jason Tatum, because Jason Tatum's the best player in the NBA. So that's what it comes down to.
Not even close to the best player, but
the best player in the NBA. Anyways, we got to talk about college football right now, because that's the big debate going on. SMU blown off the field. Indiana blown off the field. Indiana, I felt bad for Indiana, honestly. And then I've really felt bad for Tennessee, because Ohio State wanted to murder them the entire football game. So earlier in the weekend, Grant, we had the SMU game. We had the Indiana game. Who else am I missing?
Wait, you're just talking about the games?
No, the SMU got blown out. Indiana got blown out.
Tennessee got blown out. And why are we blank? Oh, Texas beat Clemson.
Texas beat Clemson. So we're not really talking about Texas beating Clemson. Clemson shouldn't have been there, but they won the ACC, so they get to be there. And Texas looked pretty good. But SMU, Indiana sparked this debate of should these teams have actually been in the college football playoff? Are we talking the best 12? Or are we talking the most deserving 12? You definitely did not get the best 12 teams on the field. You might have got the most deserving 12 teams based on the schedule. But you can also make the argument, too, that 9-3 or even a 10-2 Miami. I don't want to – people get triggered when you talk 9-3 Alabama. But let's talk 10-2 Miami. 10-2 Miami probably had a better case than – a one-loss Indiana team, but Indiana did exactly what they could have done, the most they could have done based on their schedule. So moving forward, Grant, do we need to get the best 12 or the most deserving 12?
You know, I've been really frustrated with a lot of the commentary about the college football playoff. And yeah, there were the debates before the bracket came out, about who deserved to get in. But really, once the bracket did come out, I feel like they kind of went away. Surprisingly, I didn't feel like there was much South Carolina, SMU, or Ole Miss, Alabama talk. And then now that we've seen this first round and most of the games were blowouts, the talk is back. And again, it's been frustrating for me because I think most of the people doing the talking probably never played sports or were never true competitors. And that doesn't go for all of the people that are having this conversation, but that's the only thing that I can think of when I hear some of these takes. Did we get the 12 best teams in the country?
No.
We probably got 10 of them. They were close, maybe 11. They were close. And, if you want to pick the worst team in the field, let's call it SMU, Indiana, whoever it is. They're still probably a top 15, top 16 team in the country. So it's not like there was this egregious error that was made. But why I get so frustrated is sports are about competition. If we're just going to make this the Vegas odds makers bracket, then it's not the college football playoff. It's something that was predetermined at the start of the year. This roster stacks up the best with this roster. When you're actually competing, you're competing for something. That's why, and I'm not saying the college football playoff is March Madness, but in March Madness, when you get to the Final Four and you have a George Mason, when you have a Florida Gulf Coast, when you have a St. Peter's, those are not one of the 8 best teams in the country. But it's a sport that's about competition. So if you get these opportunities and you seize them, you deserve to be rewarded for that. Again, I'm not even going to try to argue that SMU is better than Alabama, because the fact is we don't know. We're just looking at what we do know based on the numbers they put, the performances they had, and based on all of that, SMU earned their spot. Alabama did not.
The biggest difference between football and basketball is anyone can win in the game of basketball, because if you get hot and make shots, you can win. In football, it's totally different. I think that's what we saw this weekend. And Tennessee was outmatched by Ohio State too. So it makes the Indiana SMU debate a little tougher there. But Tennessee also was not tested much this season. Their premier win was over an Alabama team that many called trash because they lost to Oklahoma. My issue with comparing like Alabama to Indiana to SMU, and I know the SEC is undefeated in these hypothetical scenarios, but the biggest difference that you get when you play football between SEC teams in Indiana and SMU is no matter what SEC program you're taking, you win in the trenches. These kids are so much bigger and more physical up front. Same thing we saw it with Notre Dame, outmatched Indiana. We saw it with Penn State, this is James Franklin, can't win a big game, Penn State. And they just flat out dominated SMU. The cold had something to do with it. The weather had something to do with it. But we saw how much difference the game is. The biggest difference in the game is in the trenches for both sides. So the mid-major programs, yes, they did. I'm not saying SMU's mid-major. I'm not saying Indiana's mid-major, but the less talent, less scheduled teams, they could not match up physically in the trenches. And I think that's what we're going to see this weekend with Boise State against Penn State. Because as great as Ashton Jeanty is, and I know they played Oregon tough, there is still a physical difference between the offensive and defensive lines for the Big Ten, the SEC, than in the lower end of the ACC and the mid-major program. So Alabama, yeah, they didn't get the job done against Oklahoma. They didn't. But they still have the talent. They still have the 4- and 5-star offensive linemen, and that's what makes the difference in these games. It's not the skill players; it's the talent up front.
It plays a big part of it, and I think offensive line play, defensive line is getting its just due, especially the edge guys. The D tackles probably still don't get enough credit, but line play, I think, is magnified in road rivalry games and playoff games, I would say, because skill position guys, like if we're going to make this, and let's talk about the NFL for a second. The Cincinnati Bengals really are not that great of a team, but they've got Joe Burrow, they've got Jamar Chase, and they've got T. Higgins, right? So that means they can win pretty much any game they play as a one-off. Can they win the Super Bowl? No, they can't, because if you're constantly getting overpowered at the point of attack, you're not going to hold up. Now, going back to what we saw on the field, I actually want to give this Indiana defense credit yet again. I thought the defense was awesome against Ohio State. People are going to look at that final score. You got to remember, it was 7-7. They gave up 2 special teams touchdowns. The Indiana defense was great against Ohio State, and they were great against Notre Dame. They gave up the big run to Jeremiah Love, which didn't help because it set them behind the 8 ball. But after that, they pretty much did not let Notre Dame do a whole lot of anything. The only time they were able to make consistent progress, it was a lot of shorter intermediate stuff. And that's just because the Indiana defense was on the field for so long. They were getting no support from their offense. And it was the same thing against Ohio State too. So in hindsight, perhaps that was something you could have looked at and said, okay, maybe the defense will show up, the offense won't. With SMU, Kevin Jennings just completely shot them in the foot. We were trying to figure out who the second best quarterback in the bracket was. And we talked about Kevin Jennings as having maybe the upside, but he's also he's very inaccurate. He's very erratic, some of the decisions he makes. And that's what you saw. SMU did move the ball. They just turned the ball over, and they really had no hope from the start.
No, and SMU could not match up physically against Penn State. Like Indiana could not match up physically against Notre Dame. And there probably is teams out there, and I'm not saying they're the best or the most deserving, but Ole Miss's talent up front, South Carolina's talent up front, Alabama's talent up front probably makes a difference in these games. And best versus most deserving, I think we're never going to figure that out, because when it comes down to it, the way the schedule happened this year, what happened the first round, we're going to look more to strength of schedule in the coming years. We know that. I almost think it would be better to let these teams free schedule, not get rid of conferences, but almost say, hey, you guys put your own schedule together. You can play as many in-conference or out-of-conference games as you want. I mean, that kind of destroys the conference championships. But in the end of the day, do we really need conference championships? You schedule what you want to schedule. You could schedule 12 cupcakes, go 12-0, you might not get in. But if you schedule a really hard schedule and you go 8-4, but you played 6 top 25 games, maybe you get in. Maybe that's more valuable to the committee. So I think that's a way we could do it in the future. It's probably not logical because the conferences make too much money, but that would be a way to figure out who the most deserving and the best 12 teams are moving forward.
I also find it interesting that a lot of, the Alabama, I think it was the athletic director, put out a statement and basically said, we're scheduling a cupcake schedule if that's what it's going to take for us to make the playoff, right? We have one 3-loss team in this bracket, and it's the team that scheduled the toughest out-of-conference schedule. That's Clemson. They scheduled South Carolina right at the end of the year, and they scheduled Georgia first week of the season. Now, they lost both of those games, and maybe that is, that's something you would point to in favor of the SEC. But it does go to show that, hey, you can schedule tough out-of-conference games, and it's going to boost your strength of schedule rating. And whatever, if you don't win that game, maybe you take the lessons you learned in the loss and you become a better team for it. Because I'm sure that playing that really tough South Carolina team helped Clemson right before they go to the ACC championship. And it goes back to what I said at the start, which was maybe we got 10 of the best 12 or 11 of the best 12. But we got the 12 most deserving teams. Clemson had no shot of making that playoff based on what they had done. But then they went and they won the conference championship. They did what they needed to do. They executed in the big moment. And that's what sports are about.
Yeah. I mean, all things even, if you're going to sit here and say every schedule was even, we did get the 12 most deserving teams, every schedule being even, but every schedule is not even. And that is the biggest issue. And that's what the committee is going to have to look to in the coming seasons. In the end of the day, though, there's only a few teams that can win a national championship, whether you have 12 teams, 16 teams, 14 teams, it doesn't matter. There are right now, currently, I believe, Oregon can win a national championship. Georgia can win a championship. Texas can win a championship. Ohio State can win a championship. And Texas is just because they have a clear path and anyone can win one semifinal game over a really talented team. So right now, I think there's 4 teams. Maybe Notre Dame, you could throw that in, 5 teams. Would you agree with that, Grant, or do you think it's even smaller than that?
I would leave it at the 4. Respect to Notre Dame. They looked good against Indiana, but I don't think Riley Leonard can deliver a national championship.
So if you got Notre Dame versus Penn State in the semifinals, which is likely, we don't know what's going to happen with Gunnar Stockton this weekend in Georgia or on Wednesday, but if you got that matchup, who would you take there?
I would feel more comfortable about Penn State's team, but the question is always going to be James Franklin. Is he going to implode again?
Penn State's got a better team than Notre Dame, I think.
Overall. And they're more talented, they're more diverse, I think is the best way to put it. Notre Dame they've got one style they want to play, and we haven't really seen them leave that style this whole season.
Yeah, definitely. So, Grant, Ohio State, let's focus on them for a minute here. Ohio State comes out and just whoops Tennessee. So it kind of takes away the argument that SMU and Indiana shouldn't have been in the college football playoff because the SEC team went into the Big Ten and just got whooped. But at the same time, too, this was the biggest challenge possible for Tennessee. I thought Ohio State wasn't going to come out and play great. I thought they'd probably win the game, but I thought it'd be much closer. Ryan Day's team wanted to kill people that night. Like, they were so fired up. I don't know if that is going to be the Ohio State team we see moving forward. I think this was a situation where we see Tennessee fans in the crowd. People have been shit-talking us for the past couple weeks. We need to respond tonight. But now you're going on the road to play an Oregon team in Pasadena, and it is a neutral site, but it's still Oregon. It's not Tennessee. What do you think we get from Ohio State moving forward in this tournament?
Yeah, so I was on the opposite side. I thought Ohio State was going to come out and play really good against Tennessee. I had them. I built, excuse me. As you know, I built models and projections and stuff to predict the score of these games, and I had Ohio State as a 14-point favorite in that game against Tennessee. And I'll admit, I looked at it and I said, this seems a little crazy. I ended up betting it because it was the largest disparity between what I had and the odds makers had. And obviously it came true. Not saying I'm a genius here, just saying like there were signs. Ohio State, if you look at the metrics, they dominate every team in the country, even Oregon, who's undefeated. Penn State, shockingly, has some amazing metrics. Whoever you want to put up there, Ohio State's going to win the mathematical battle every time. Now, this matchup, like you said, it is a neutral field. It does favor Oregon more to me because the fact it's in California and Oregon is a speed-based team, not saying they don't have other strengths, but the fact you're probably going to get warm, nice weather, that helps the speed of your team. We see that with the Miami Dolphins in the NFL. I think Oregon probably has the second best coach in the entire country right now. And with the level of preparedness he's shown, he doesn't have the same accolades as Kirby Smart, but Dan Lanning looks like he could challenge for that best coach in the country title. And obviously he came from the SEC pipeline. So I think this is going to be a really good matchup. Ohio State's going to be as confident as ever because they had to overcome mentally that loss to Michigan and go out there and convince themselves they could dominate Tennessee. Now that they have, they're going to think, we played Oregon to 1 point on the road. We can go out there and we can beat them. For Oregon, maybe not quite the same level of confidence because they just haven't played in like a month, but they're going to be well rested. They're going to be as prepared as they've been for one game this entire season. And then they can always look back on, well, we beat this team already. Why can't we do it again?
And going back to that first game, Oregon threw the ball over the field. So did Ohio State. But there were many moments for Oregon where they just didn't finish in the red zone. That score could have been a lot bigger than it was for them. I think Ohio State is going to play very, very well in this game. I think physically they match up great. I think they need to get the ball to their NFL receivers consistently in this one. But I can't see Will Howard playing as well as he did against Tennessee again. I do think the offensive line issues for Ohio State, the center injury, is going to hurt them against an Oregon team. I think we need to put the Tennessee win to bed a little bit because Tennessee, there were clear mismatches. We saw it right away. Tennessee could not play in that environment. Physically, they weren't as good. And then it was also a death sentence walking in there too because Ohio State actually showed up to play. And then they had the extra motivation of the Michigan loss. So I don't think we can judge Ohio State fully off the Tennessee game. Very few people, not very few, but I'm seeing a lot more people pick Ohio State over Oregon because of the old adage, it's tough to beat a team twice. I do think Oregon is still just as good as Ohio State. They beat them once and they have a better coach and a better quarterback. So I think that does favor Oregon in this game. So I probably am going to lean towards Oregon, but I think it's just going to be a great tight field goal game no matter what.
So can I let's talk about something you said there. You said Tennessee wasn't ready for that environment. And I would think Tennessee, of all the teams, should be ready for this environment because being in the SEC, you're going to state, you're going to your Kyle Fields, you're going to Samford's, you're going to Brian Denny.
I don't mean the loudness. I mean the fact that Ohio State was ready to murder somebody that night. Like that, it was an unwinnable situation. I think you could have put any team into that situation. They're not beating Ohio State that night.
I mean, they played excellent, and they got away from what they did in that Michigan game. Again, in the Michigan game, they tried to prove that they could have a heavyweight fight with them. They wanted to beat them in the trenches. They wanted to be as physical as they were. And they were just about, they just they shot themselves in the foot. They had a red zone turnover and stuff like that, and they ended up losing the game. They didn't try to do that against Tennessee. They did bully them, don't get me wrong, but they also got the ball on the perimeter. They got it to their playmakers. They complemented run with pass. They did everything they should from a schematic perspective to give themselves the advantage.
Now let's tip our cap to Tennessee for a second here too, though. Like not tip our cap, but say as good of a win as this was, Tennessee's toughest or biggest win was Alabama at home in a game where Jalen Milroe decided to turn the ball over like crazy. They did lose to Georgia. Other than that, they didn't have a big signature win, really. They had issues in the secondary. They have a freshman quarterback. Everyone possible on their team got injured. They had no running backs and no receivers by the end of the game. And at one point, if Tennessee can put a drive together to open the second half, this is a 4-point game.
Yeah, I mean, the final score, I think the final score is fair at the end of the day. With if the injuries hadn't happened and stuff, then maybe it is a different conversation. But even with that being the case, where if they score, it's a 4-point game, I think Ohio State dominated that. And they put the game to bed early. They said, there's no doubt we're winning this 21-0 at the end of the first quarter. Go home.
Yeah, I just can't see Will Howard and Ohio State putting that same performance together in consecutive weeks against an Oregon team that's not only well rested, but people are doubting Oregon right now. I'm looking at
Ohio State's favored.
Yeah, they're favored. the hypothetical lines, if Oregon does win this game, Oregon's an underdog to Texas in the semifinals. Like, it's only 1.5 points. And again, 1.5, 2.5 points, that's a pick'em game. Anyone can win it. But come on, this team hasn't slipped up once this season.
Well, so you want to know why that is? It's because of their strength of schedule. I'm looking. So, I mean, Arizona State has a 6.2, just to kind of set like the middle ground, I guess. Ohio State was a 13.6. Georgia's a 17.5. Penn State's a 10.6. Oregon's a 9.6. So they're behind all those other top dogs, and that's probably affecting it.
So Oregon, yeah, because Oregon didn't play. Oregon played Penn State in the Big Ten championship.
Conference championship, yeah.
I'm seeing people though too. This is wild to me, and I know it's Big Ten. If we got Ohio State versus Penn State in the national championship game, there would be people on Penn State. There would be people like Penn State could beat Ohio State. They only lost to them by what, 7 last time?
Yeah, but that was at home, and they only scored 13.
Yeah, well, Drew Aller is not that guy. We know that. I don't think Will Howard's that guy, but he's a lot better than Drew Aller. And I think Will Howard's going to be a pretty high draft pick after one more year of college because he kind of looks like that Josh Allen body type a little bit.
Will Howard?
Yeah.
Well, Drew Aller's got some interesting draft stock too as well, just because of how far he's come.
He'll go high too. Will Howard and him will both go high. They're both, what, 6'4", 6'5", 230?
Yeah. I mean, they're both tall dudes.
Yeah, so Oregon's being doubted right now. I think Dan Lanning's going to pump that into his speeches in the coming weeks. And we know Oregon will be ready to play football. I can guarantee Ohio State's going to come out and play hard. But in the end of the day, if Oregon can get up in this football game, I said the same thing about Tennessee. If Oregon can punch Ohio State in the mouth first, I'm not saying Ohio State's going to crumble, but I think they're more likely to crumble than the Dan Lanning coached Oregon. Ryan Day, don't get it twisted. They beat Tennessee, and it's a sense of relief. But Ryan Day is still coaching for his job. This whole staff is still coaching for their job. One loss can change everything.
Don't tell Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler and all those guys that though, because they might end up hitting out at you.
You know, it's hard. I like going to what Shannon Sharp said, and if you guys haven't seen it, go look at the clip. Shannon Sharp basically embarrassed Kirk Herbstreit. Said, if we work for the same network, don't talk bad about a show that I'm on, whatever. When I look at Shannon Sharp and these guys, like, ESPN must have trouble holding these guys in place because bosses at ESPN, whoop-de-freaking do. These guys are worth so much money. They can say whatever they want, and if you fire them, they're going to another network. Like, Shannon Sharp don't care.
No. I mean, he just came from another network.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter to him. I mean, he's going to say whatever he wants to say. Did you think Kirk Herbstreit said anything wrong, though, really, in the end of the day?
So I think where he went wrong, and so basically – First Take with I think it was Shannon, Stephen A, and Paul Feinbaum were talking about if Ryan Day was coaching for his job, if Ohio State. And to be fair,
yes.
I don't know who said what. To be fair, he probably is. You know, it's just simple. If he had lost to Tennessee, he's for sure getting fired. If he loses to Oregon, maybe it's a little different. But point is, there was pressure on. He was on the hot seat. Yeah. And First Take was having that conversation. And then Kirk and Chris were – it was at the point in the game where Ohio State had put it out of reach, and they were just complimenting Ryan Day, the job he had done. And they said, you know, there are a bunch of people, a bunch of lunatics who were saying that, you know, he's coaching for his job out here right now. If he's not going to win this game, and he said something to the effect of like, how about that, First Take? And where he went wrong is like, it's cool to just say, how could you think Ryan Day was coaching for his job? Look at what he just did. That's once you call someone out, you're giving them the right to respond to it. And, you know, Shannon, Sharp, Stephen A, we know the type of guys they are. They're going to respond to it. And Shannon, I think, he drew the line in the sand, right? Like, he was very hostile. He's very abrasive. He didn't say anything bad, but he basically said, like, don't try it. Don't play with me.
Yeah. And again, I don't know what Shannon and Stephen A said on First Take. Did they say Ryan Day is going to get fired if he loses his job?
I don't know which one of them took the position, but that was the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, they were wrong. Kirk Herbstreit is an Ohio State guy. Like, you think he's going to support his school? It's a little friendly banter. Shannon Sharp was like, if I'm in the same room with you, I will. Don't be in the same room with me, basically. So Yeah, it is what it is. I think Ryan Day looked, credit to Ryan Day. That was a tough spot for him to walk into and win a football game. But in the end of the day, they played an inferior Tennessee team. They played great. The kids were focused, but they played an inferior Tennessee team. We need to see what they look like against Oregon this weekend, because it doesn't help too now that you're putting this Ohio State team up on a pedestal. And then you can give all this bulletin board material to Oregon coming into this game, who has the better quarterback. They still have really good wide receivers. Defensively, I'm concerned about Oregon. Ohio State does have a big edge on defense, but we saw it in the last game. Oregon was able to beat them long, short, and through the middle of the field. They had their way with Ohio State, and they weren't efficient in the red zone. So if they can clean that up, I don't think there's any reason Oregon can't win this game. What about you, Grant? Who you take?
I agree with everything you said. I'm taking Ohio State just because of how talented they are and what they can be at their best. But I'm with you on what you said. Oregon can easily win this. I would worry more about Ohio State falling behind than I would Oregon. The fact it is the neutral field and it's in California, again, I think it plays to Oregon's strengths. I agree with all of that. I just know the talent that Ohio State has, and I'm gonna ride with the Jimmies and Joes over the X's and O's.
Yeah, I mean, by far the best, most talented team in the country. So we're going to see what happens in this game. Now, if we got Texas, which we probably will, against Ohio State, Grant, is it slam dunk Ohio State over Texas, or is it if Quinn Ewers plays well, they have a chance? Because right now Texas is +1.5 to Ohio State.
I think I would feel more comfortable picking Ohio State or Oregon to beat Texas. But the Texas defense is really good. Now, it's funny saying that because they just gave up a season high in passing yards to Cade Klubnik. Cade Klubnik made some awesome throws. He really raised his draft stock in that game. He played the quarterback position very well. And what it showed is that it's going to take a team that can do that. You're going to have to throw the ball. You're going to have to create explosive plays on this Texas defense because they are so stout on the front line, and they also have so much talent in the secondary. They got the best secondary in the country based on the statistics. I would take Ohio State or Oregon to beat them, but I think it is a close game. I don't think either one of them blows them out.
No, I don't know if Texas is good, if bookmakers are high on Texas, because Texas is always getting love. I just don't see it as much because I don't see Quinn Ewers taking over a game, but I can say Will Howard, I don't necessarily see him taking over a game. Quinn Ewers has looked good at times like Will Howard this season, but I just can't get behind him. Like I can't get behind Quinn. I know Texas physically can match up with Ohio State. There's still a lot of talent there. I think, like you said, Oregon or Ohio State, I would take them to beat Texas, but I just can't get a read on Texas right now. I don't know they haven't really played anyone. They look good at times. They look bad at times, kind of like every team in college football. So I just see that line +1.5, and I'm a little surprised by it. I would think that would be closer to a field goal.
They're also becoming a run-first team recently. I mean, they've been awesome on the ground, and that's also probably why I would like Ohio State a little more than Oregon against Texas. I think Ohio State has a little bit of a better ability to stop the run. But yeah, it would be good. It'd be interesting to see.
All right, so Georgia, Notre Dame. I think we're both on the same side here. I think Georgia finds a way to win this game and win it convincingly. I think it's going to be like a 10 to 14 point win for Georgia if they can play their game and Notre Dame isn't enforcing their will on them throughout the night. But I think Notre Dame's really going to have a wake-up call going against the Georgia front seven here. I think they're going to struggle to run the ball, and then you're going to put the ball in Riley Leonard's hands, and we know that doesn't go well.
What's interesting about this game is Notre Dame actually opened as a 1.5 favorite, and it's now Georgia -2. So as far as I'm concerned, nothing has changed really from the player health perspective. And Notre Dame, I would have thought, if anything, it maybe improved their stock with their win against Indiana. Indiana came back and made the final score look respectable, but that was it was like 27-3 in the fourth quarter. So I think the only explanation there is probably there's just a lot of bets coming in on Georgia. That would be my biggest guess. I would still take Georgia, like you said, even with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback. And like you said before, this is a redshirt sophomore. So he's got reps. He's got experience with the team. He's not coming in there as a nobody. He was a very highly recruited 4-star quarterback. I think he was top 10 quarterback in the country in his class. And he stepped in and he played well in the SEC championship game. I'm not going to go as far as you to say it's a 10 to 14 point game. I think this is like a 3 or a 4 point game. But I just trust Georgia to execute within the margins, lean on their championship experience more than I do Notre Dame.
Yeah, I trust this game to be in the hands of Georgia at all times. Like, you might say it's close, but Georgia is controlling the pace. They're controlling the tempo. I really want to see Georgia make Riley Leonard throw the ball, because it did not look pretty. In the rare occasions that we got it against Indiana, it didn't look great. He didn't look comfortable in the pocket. So if we can get a Georgia pass rush against Riley Leonard, I'm really going to look forward to seeing that. I think Gunnar Stockton's a better quarterback than Riley Leonard right off the bat. I think he's going to be no problem better. I think Riley Leonard, if he does run the ball and they choose to run him consistently, I think Georgia's going to make him pay. It's going to be, it's a matchup that favors Georgia, even with a backup quarterback. And I think Georgia, Penn State, that's one that I'm more concerned about than Georgia, Notre Dame.
If I'm Marcus Freeman, if I am the coach at Notre Dame, I am grinding Georgia Tech film ahead of this matchup, because Georgia Tech, with the quick passes, the screens, the triple option stuff, the runs, the short passing game, Haynes King in that game was awesome. He had 303 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, ran the ball for 110 yards, 3 touchdowns. So 5 total touchdowns, more than 400 total yards of offense from a quarterback who was outmatched. Georgia Tech was outmatched on the road at Georgia, and they went in and they took them to 8 overtimes. Notre Dame, top to bottom, is a better team than Georgia Tech. And I'm not taking away from Georgia Tech. They are a good team. They're on the rise. Brent Key's doing a good job. And Haynes King is an underrated quarterback.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Haynes King is much more elusive than Riley Leonard running the ball and passing the ball. And what they do with their offense is more effective than what Notre Dame does with their offense.
I agree. I do agree. But I'm saying that style has given Georgia problems. And it's not just them. It's that style staying within the SEC. You know, Vanderbilt took Texas to overtime, and they were doing the same thing. Diego Pavia running the triple option. This is something that Georgia's not been great against, those mobile quarterback designed runs, the short, quick stuff, high efficiency plays, which don't necessarily have, like, they don't get explosive plays, but they consistently gain yardage. That's been the stuff that's given Georgia problems this year. So I'm just saying that's something that Notre Dame is at least set up to do. Is Riley Leonard as good as Haynes King? You can have that conversation if you want, but he should be able to execute some of the same looks. So that's what I would be doing if I'm over on the Notre Dame coaching staff.
Yeah, definitely. I still think Georgia wins the game. I think Kirby with a month is just like unfair. The Georgia Bulldogs will be ready to play this football game. He is by far the best coach in this. And if Georgia does win the national championship or make it to the national championship, I have my fears about them winning it, because I don't think they can outduel anybody in the top part of the bracket with their current situation. But they can get there pretty easily based on their path right now. It's going to be because of Kirby Smart.
Yeah, 100%. If you're going to take a backup quarterback who basically hasn't played in college, an underclassman, and you're going to get to the national championship, that's coaching. There's no way around it.
Yeah. So does Georgia get out of this side of the bracket, Grant? Or do they lose to either Penn State or Notre Dame, or maybe Boise State? I'll give Boise State some credit, but
I would say yes. And if it's not going to be them, I would pick Penn State. Even though I hate to say it because of James Franklin's history, that would be the team I would pick. Penn
State. I think Penn State Texas would be cool. I don't really want to see Penn State Ohio State. I think Penn State Texas would be a cooler matchup. I would like to see Penn State win a national championship. I don't think they can. I don't think they have the team to do it. But you're telling me if we get Penn State, Ohio State in a rematch, tough to beat the team twice. People can be saying that week. I don't know. Same thing with Oregon.
It would be nice to have a cross-conference national championship. I'm with you. I don't want to see Georgia, Texas. I don't want to see Ohio State, Penn State. I don't want to see even Oregon, Penn State, even though it's Oregon's first year in the conference. We just saw it in the Big Ten championship. I want to get a new matchup.
Yeah. So, Grant, right now, looking at the field, we'll save our championship pick for later on, because we don't want to get into that. We don't want to give the people a championship pick right now. I think we've alluded to it multiple times. But would you take Oregon, Ohio State, Oregon or Ohio State, or the field?
Absolutely, right? Oregon or Ohio State.
You would. Oregon, Ohio State. Okay.
I think they're the two best teams by a decent margin.
I think they are too. My one fear, though, it's like if you win this game, and I probably am taking Oregon, Ohio State if I had the choice. But if you win this game, whether you're Oregon or Ohio State, now you got to go play Texas, and then you got to go play Georgia. Like, I don't know if there's going to be bodies left. They still got to win 3 more football games. This tournament is wild. Like we're talking to everyone's talking online right now, like Oregon, Ohio State's national championship. Then you still got to go beat Texas. And if you're Ohio State, you had a huge win over Tennessee. You had a huge win over Oregon in the Rose Bowl. And now you got to sustain it and go be a Texas team that hasn't been tested in really 2 weeks, assuming they get through Arizona State pretty easily. That's tough.
Yeah, the toughest part about it is going to be what you're saying. It's not winning each matchup, it's winning them all. Like, you've got to make sure you stay healthy. You got to make sure you stay mentally focused, and you've got to be fresh enough to go out there and execute. Like in the case of Ohio State, would I pick Ohio State to beat Tennessee? Would I pick them to beat Oregon? Would I pick them to beat Texas? Would I pick them to beat Georgia? I would. But 4 times in a row, that's different from if you're a Penn State going against SMU, Boise State, maybe Notre Dame, or a Georgia with a backup quarterback. It's a very different path.
Yeah, I don't know if the bye week's going to end up helping or hurting these teams. Like, it's going to help in the sense of you've played already and you're not coming into this game not playing for a month. But if you look at Oregon, the difference in wait time is almost similar to what Ohio State had last week, because they had the tough game in the Big Ten championship. They get their break now, where Ohio State didn't play until the week before that. So I don't know if it's going to help or hurt teams, but if I'm looking at a schedule here, I probably would rather have the bye than get a cakewalk in the first round, because at least, for sure, Oregon's been preparing for Ohio State for the past month. Like, they weren't watching Tennessee film. Same thing with, Arizona State and Texas. Like, Arizona State's been watching Texas film. So I do think the war of attrition is going to play a factor here, which people aren't talking about that as much as they need to. It's hard to beat an SEC team. It's hard to beat another SEC or a Big Ten team again. So if you're Ohio State or Oregon, while this probably is the national championship game, or at least feels like it, still got a long way to go.
Yeah, it's only the halfway point of the bracket,
which is crazy to think about, because this season is just longer than all these guys have played. So I would say Oregon, Ohio State, I would take that over the field right now, but it's concerning if you're making that bet, because you can make it, since you're knocking one of those teams out and then your team has to stay healthy and win over the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, I'm just excited to watch it. It's going to be, I'm a little disappointed Boise State, Penn State's on New Year's Eve. I understand why, but I don't know about you. I'm going to be out with friends and stuff, but I'm excited to, I've already cleared the schedule on New Year's Day. I'm going to hopefully get to the gym in the morning, sweat the hangover out, and then it's just college football all day.
Penn State, Boise State's already done. That game's done. You should have put those games. Texas, Arizona State should have been on New Year's Eve too, and put the other games on New Year's Day, late on New Year's Day. The schedules, I like the schedule. I get you can't do it, granted, because the Rose Bowl, you got to play the 2 o'clock kickoff in Pasadena. But I would have rather seen Oregon, Ohio State at night, in Georgia, Texas, or Georgia versus Notre Dame earlier. But either way, they're both solid.
Yeah, I'm with you. Would have liked to see the West Coast game last, but not a big deal.
No. Anyways, Grant, that was Ride the Line for today. Why don't you take us out of here?
It was Ride the Line, guys. Tanner and I appreciate you all being here. Merry Christmas. Hope you guys get to spend the holidays with your loved ones. And, of course, we got some great sports on, so enjoy them as well. Check out WSN.com for anything and everything related to sports betting. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button as well. Tanner and I will catch you all on the next episode of Ride the Line.